Welcome back to Pack Mentality. I'm Matt Banwart. My wife, Caitlin, and I own Red Wolf CrossFit in Huntington Beach, California. And we started this podcast with one goal in mind, and that was to make fitness education accessible, engaging, and effective for everyone. Today, Caitlin and I are going to be discussing the more ways you measure, the more ways you will win. And basically what we're chatting about is kind of what measurement means in different contexts when it comes to fitness, nutrition, and maybe even personal growth. We'll be going over why measurement is crucial for success and progress. We'll be sharing examples of our own experience, especially something that happened recently that we went through, such as tracking workouts, other metrics, KPIs, or personal goals. We'll specifically be focusing today on measuring fitness and health. That's going to be our main topic of discussion. We're going to dabble a little bit into measuring nutrition. And then finally, we'll be wrapping things up with a little segment at the end called The Gap and the Gain, which is kind of like how you compare yourself to yourself, essentially. So, Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Hello. Nice to see you.
It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know us, we spend almost every waking minute together, don't we?
Yep.
Do you ever get sick of me?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I know you do. Let's get right into it, shall we? Let's just first off define what measurement even means in the first place, especially in this kind of context. So, let's define what measurement means in like a fitness context.
Just, I guess, comparing yourself physically as far as how much can you lift, how fast can you run, how many reps can you do of a certain skill, how far can you stretch? I mean, there can be an endless amount of things, but I think when it comes to fitness, there is a scientific side to it. So it's very specific, I guess you can say.
Yeah, exactly. And one of our core values here at Red Wolf is that we make decisions based on evidence and data. And I think that is where a lot of fitness programs or gyms in general really fall short on, is that they kind of develop their own program, which is fine. And I'm sure that it works in their own terms. Or they buy one. And basically what happens is that there's no way to actually measure or track if someone is actually making progress in these realms. So that's why we have the InBody. So another way we measure fitness progress is body composition, specifically pertaining to weight, skeletal muscle mass, body fat percentage, body fat mass, also visceral fat. And I could go on and on, but I'm not going to bore you with that. And like Caitlin said, with the actual measurements of physical performance, like 40-meter run, 1 mile run, burpees in 7 minutes, deadlift, front squat, back squat, all that fun stuff. And measurement is crucial because without it, like I said earlier, how do you even know that you're making progress? Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to set and attain goals. And we know in a fitness perspective that if you know you're not making progress or you're staying stagnant, it's really hard to stay motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I just said, fitness is scientific. And so when you take a scientific approach at something, there's testing available, right? You have an hypothesis, and then you test it and you against different measurements, and then you have a conclusion. And did it work or did it not work? What adjustments are you going to make in the future? And then you try it again. And that's kind of the beauty of it, but it is very repetitive. And so if you just get caught in a spiral of not making progress, yes, it's more likely that you're just going to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait to dive a little bit deeper into some of these subjects that we just kind of overviewed. But let's kind of talk about what happened to us recently with, you and I and the kids all at once, or very compressed,
Yep.
Got extremely sick. We both came down with a really bad stomach virus. Like it hit you around 10 a.m. on earlier this week.
Yeah.
Or last week, I should say. And then it hit me like at 1 or 2 o'clock right after. And it was bad. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we rarely get sick in general, and our kids also rarely get sick. And so when it does take us down, it's pretty hard, I guess. And we definitely spiraled very fast and completely depleted. I mean, dehydrated, no calories for probably 48 hours total time.
Yeah, I haven't been that sick in 4 years.
Yeah, and that really had a drastic effect on our body. And it was funny because we had just worked out pretty hard the day before, felt totally fine.
Oh yeah, I felt great.
And that day I actually planned on working out the next hour. And then I was like, I don't think I can work out. And
it got worse.
And it got worse, yeah. And
to where it was you couldn't work out at all.
No,
you couldn't even stand.
Couldn't even stand. And yeah, and then recovering from that was just very tough. And I had told Matt, wow, I see why people like how easy it is to get unmotivated and to just stop, because it was difficult for me to start to get going again, because you go through the phases of, you compare yourself to what you were before, what you lost, right? I lost so much strength. In reality, I really didn't lose much strength, but I just felt so weak. And for us, at least for me, it's kind of a game. And I start trying to figure out like, okay, well, Caitlin, you didn't eat for like 2 days. So I'm in a huge caloric deficit. And so I gave myself permission to eat, and to eat a lot, and a lot of very nutritious foods, not just junk, right? I don't want to feed my body that, but it just became a whole science approach at how am I going to get back to how I felt 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
At least in the gym perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you kind of walk us through like kind of some ways that you measured your progress just those first few days that you got back into it?
Yeah. So like I said, it was like 48 hours until I felt like, okay. And then on the third day, I guess 72 hours later, I just moved around. I did one of the class workouts, but I did it extremely modified.
Yeah.
So below fitness level, I guess, in that sense. And I was like, okay, like I can move, and I didn't even sweat, because I just tried to keep my heart rate low and just keep moving. And it seemed silly because just the week before I back squatted 245, and now I was barely doing air squats. And even though it seemed silly, I still did it. And for me, it's like I can check the box, like, okay, I did it. Like, and now I can move on to step 2. And then step 2 is to do just 20 minutes on the Echo bike, which everybody knows is terrible, at just a decent pace in the sun. I made sure it was in the sun because I want vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And if I could do that, okay, great. My lungs, I have some capacity there. I'm okay. And then the next day came. And so like they were like, 4 days later, and I just went for a run. I tried to run 2 miles. And then I did 50 air squats and 100 lunges, which is the challenge of the month of the gym. And I said, okay, if I can do that, then I can do a workout. And so it wasn't until like 5 days at this point where I finally considered doing a decent workout. And I remember I tried to bench, incredibly weak, could barely do numbers that I was used to. And I was like, that's okay. At least I could move the bar and I felt okay. It just felt good to push weight again. Mm-hmm. And then I did kind of like some deadlifts and some legs, and and then the 6th day, that's when I did a full workout. And I did it like RX or RX Plus or whatever, but I really pushed myself. So we're at like a whole week after being sick. Mm-hmm.
And you had like these mini goals and these mini progress points and measurement points every day that built off each other until you were back to square one.
Yeah, exactly. And I never like gave half effort. I gave full effort, even though, like I said, the movements might seem silly. My times and weights might not compare to what I was used to. But in order to get back into what I want to be doing, I need to be able to do, like, to me, the minimums or just the basics.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, when they get sick or they travel and they're out of the gym for a few weeks and then they come back and they just expect to be exactly where they were.
Yeah.
Like, that's so unrealistic. And then you get hard on yourself and you kind of like punish yourself a little bit, like, man, I shouldn't have taken that time off, or, oh, I'm have such a big setback now. And that is unmotivating, and that's going to keep you out of the gym, because then you're like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm terrible.
Yeah. Then you just throw your hands up and you're like, screw it. I suck.
It's so much negative energy. And I try to stay away from that, and I don't compare. And I'm kind of a little bit more gracious with myself. Like, wow, like I was really down. I went to the hospital, everybody. Like that's how bad it was for me.
Yeah,
I was so dehydrated and I'm not used to that. And so I got to be a little bit more gracious with myself. And that's why I was like, okay, like I ran a very slow mile, but hey, like at least I ran. Yeah. Like other people aren't even doing that. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's more important to surround yourself with positive energy, and it starts with you. Don't expect other people to give you this positive energy. You have to decide on your own.
Exactly.
That this is what I'm going to do, and follow the process, right? Like I said, I had a step every single day in the right direction with purpose. And if I could do that, I allowed myself to do the next thing.
Yeah.
If I failed, I would have repeated. but I didn't. So
Yeah, no, 100%. And for myself, you know, like my measurement of progress of kind of pulling myself out of that. And believe me, like I've had much worse, but this was like the first time in a while where I've been like out.
Yeah.
Like absolutely out. Like, and where both of us have been out. And so for me, my first day back was just not even to work out. I was like, my goal was just to simply get 10,000 steps. So that was my,
That's good.
yeah. So my first measurement was like, okay, today I'm not even gonna work out. Like, I don't care. My only task today is 10,000 steps. If I get to 10,000, I have made progress, and I did. And so I was coaching, and I made sure that, you know, I was on my feet and walking around. I made sure that I walked back and forth between the apartment instead of driving.
I remember that.
I was tired.
What amount of steps were you getting when we were sick or when we were at home?
I still got up to 5,000.
Wow, that's in the apartment.
Which is weird. Yeah, I mean, probably on the low end, probably on the first day where we were really sick, probably like 3,000,
Yeah. Okay. Good.
3 to 5,000. But that was also because the first half of the day I was fine,
Yeah.
and then the second half I was not. I was in bed
On the couch.
I was on the couch. And then so that was my first measurement, and then my second measurement was I went for a run. I was like, I'm just going to complete 1 mile. Because I know first off my running sucks. So I've been working on that lately. And I was like, I don't care how slow I do it. I warmed up. I'm like, it's just 1 mile. That's it. That's all I have to do. And so I completed the mile. It was terrible. I was super slow and my lungs hurt, but I did it. And that was my task for the next day. And then the third day, I actually did a light CrossFit workout. I went there, I warmed up. I really didn't want to do it. I was tired. I was still kind of recovering because, you know, I was in the same thing, caloric deficit, dehydrated. And my workout was a 20-minute AMRAP. I did 10 deadlifts at 155, 10 push-ups, 10 lunges as part of the challenge, and then 10 supinated ring row, just so I can kind of get everything and kind of get a full body in and just move slowly. And my goal was like, I'm just going to complete this for 20 minutes. But then as I got going, I had all these micro goals within it of how I was measuring. So my first round probably took me close to like almost 3 or 4 minutes. It was pathetic. I had to sit down for 2 minutes. I timed my rest. Because I like measuring things. And then my next round, I was like, okay, I'm going to rest 90 seconds. And then I'm going to rest a minute. And then I rested 30 seconds. And then I got to the point where my last 2 rounds, I actually completed 6 rounds of this, with my first round taking almost 6 minutes, including the rest. With no rest at all, I actually picked up tempo. I was like, okay, and that was a huge win for me because I went from like not wanting to do it at all to being like, this really sucks.
Yeah.
To, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit better and I'm resting less and I'm starting to kind of get in a groove. And then to where my last 2 rounds, I was like, wow, like I went from feeling horrendous when I first started this and I wanted to do it all to where I could probably do another round.
Yeah.
But I still stopped there because mission accomplished and I felt good. That was a huge win because when I measured that and I just looked at my watch, even though I felt bad, I felt the same the entire workout physically. But when I tracked my rest and I saw how long it was taking me or how less it was taking me every round to the point where it was like, it took me like 3 minutes to do 2 rounds in my last round rather than my first round, you know, which was super slow. So when I saw that kind of progress and I saw those measurements, I was like, okay, like that's huge. And then finally the next day, I actually worked out with class and then my whole goal was like, I'm just going to do this. I just want to finish the workout. I ended up having to do RX Plus because all the bikes were taken. So I was like, well,
with the lunges.
Yeah, I'm the owner of the gym. So I'm like, I'm not going to take a biker from someone. So I'm going to echo bike. And if I'm going to echo bike, I'm going to do RX Plus and use the 50-pound dumbbell, which I normally can do. But this was like my first actual workout back and I finished it. It sucked and I didn't like it, but I was like, I still finished the workout RX Plus underneath the cap. And that was a huge win for me. And then if I compared myself though to my previous self, you know, a week ago, then it would be a terrible performance. But I was like, this is a huge win considering the day before I didn't even want to work out at all.
Yeah.
And before that I was floored on the couch. So and then always knowing that like, hey, I'm just going to build off the next day. Even if today is not that great, it's setting me up for the next one.
Yeah. I mean, you always hear people talk about 1% better. Like that's not a joke. I think people really need to take that seriously and focus on just being a little bit better than what they did before. Or at least the same, right? Never getting worse. Worse would be, it's not even an option. You always either want to be the same as the day before on purpose or getting better.
Yeah. And it would, old Matt, like 10 years ago, Matt would have looked at this and been like, man, I suck. What, like, what's the point of even working out? But what I found ways to measure, and then I ended up actually remotivating me to even work out again, because I'm like, okay, like I have measurements to show that I'm improving. So just like anything else, like if you see yourself improving, that is the most motivating thing in the world. Like if you go from 1 double under to 10, suddenly double unders don't suck as much. Yeah. So it's the same thing here. And the only way to get that 1% better is to actually measure. Yeah. And sometimes there'll be days where you get better at something, but you may not make progress in something else.
You get worse at something else.
But if you're measuring, and you're measuring in as many ways as possible, the more ways you win, the more ways you stay motivated, and the more ways you will actually keep making progress.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up, that like one thing might be getting better, but the other thing might be getting worse. For example, my workout yesterday was double unders and muscle ups, and my muscle ups were terrible yesterday, and I just could not do more than 1 or 2 reps at a time. But that wasn't my actual focus. My focus was doing the 30 double unders unbroken. And I did it the whole time. Like I never broke. And so I did have a win there, even though one thing kind of got worse. And it's actually the thing I've been working on got worse, but that's okay. And understanding that there's different parts of the workout that you don't have to get better at everything. But if you just get better at one thing, then you use that momentum and move on to the next task. It's unrealistic to think you're going to get better at every single thing all the time for the rest of your life. It's not going to happen. You're going to get worse in one area, better than in the other. And I see a lot of people just constantly staying terrible at the exact same thing for years and years and years. And it's like, when at one point are you going to drop the thing you're good at in order to improve slightly 1% more the thing that you sucked at for years?
Right.
And for example, I see this all the time with mobility. I mean, nobody wants to work on that. It's boring, right? And they just want to work on the things that are fun and the things that they're good at. But at what point are you just going to drop the strong lift, the deadlift, the bench press, whatever? Just let go of that for a little bit and work on your weaknesses, work on your conditioning, work on your mobility, and just spend 6 months doing that. Just think of where you'd be and how much better you'd be at, and track your progress in that realm versus only focusing on the thing you're good at.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's very well put. And, I think a lot of times people get so attached to like PR numbers or even just like their overall weight. And I think that when you kind of peel back the layers and you can also see that there's also health indicators that imply that you are making progress, even if like maybe your PRs are going down, your mile time's not as good, maybe you gain some weight, but if your health markers are good, like let's say your resting heart rate's better, your blood pressure's better, your sleep quality's better, you have a better quality of life, you're happier, and you're making progress in those areas of life too. I think that's those things are often go overlooked in terms of measurement.
Yep.
So it's really easy to look at that and being like, oh my God, I'm getting worse. Well, are you?
Yeah.
Are you really getting worse? Or you're just measuring in a very narrow window.
And it depends also on your fitness journey. Everyone's at a different point. Okay. I see this a lot where I have the new person come in brand new to fitness, right? It's easy for them to have very specific goals. I want to back squat 100 pounds. I want to bench press 95 pounds, whatever. And that's super easy to accomplish if you have zero experience in the gym. When we start talking about progress in other areas, I mean, we've had people at the gyms. We have a lot of 5-year vets. That's like one of our big goal points that people try to get to and earn. And so I have a lot of people who've been here for over 5 years. And again, like I said, at what point are you just going to start working on something else? Because Matt and I have been doing this for well over 10 years now. And it gets boring if you're just constantly focusing on back squat, deadlift, bench press, running, whatever. There has to be other sides of fitness that you can track and get better at. And trust me, those things are going to improve your squat. They're going to improve your deadlift. Like everything comes into play. But if you're not willing to start branching out and thinking about other realms of fitness that can be improved upon, you're just going to stay stagnant forever.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, also the nervous system will start adapting to just that only thing. And then when, that's one of the beauties of CrossFit is that the CrossFit defines fitness as work capacity over broad time and modal domains. So in a nutshell, so layman's terms, what that means is that you're able to do a bunch of different tasks in a bunch of different time realms. So like long, short, whatever. And so a lot of times people often I see neglect the long, especially CrossFitters, right? Because like CrossFit's definition or like the perception I think of long in a CrossFit workout is probably anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The perception of long to a ultra marathon runner is measured in days actually.
Yeah.
There are races that last days.
Wow, it's crazy.
You know, like I mean, the Tour de France is what, 21 days, 28 days or something. So it's like they're
every day.
So again, this comes back to measurement. Like just because that's your current measuring stick, doesn't mean you can't break through into another realm and then move that measuring stick to something else.
Oh my gosh, such a good thing to talk about because again, with the new people we've had, you ask them to do 50 air squats and their eyeballs, are about to pop out of their head. They're like, what? 50? Like that's a lot. But then you give a 5-year vet at Red Wolf 50 air squats and they're like, no big deal. I'll do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Or less, whatever. Like, because it takes time and it takes gradual increases on purpose in order to see progress.
Yeah. That's what's funny is that actually reminds me of a brief kind of like side quest here of someone who I worked out with years ago at my original gym who was a Navy SEAL. Mm-hmm. And I remember we did like some crazy 30-minute AMRAP. And I was like, dude, how are you able to, me being ignorant 20-year-old was like asking a Navy SEAL how he's able to push through a 30-minute workout. He's like, dude, I did this for 5.5 days with 2 hours of sleep during Hell Week. He's like, this is not long.
Yeah.
But to me, my perception of my measuring stick was 30 minutes is a long time because at the time, like CrossFit workouts weren't even that long yet, but to him, he's like, dude, I did lunges up and down the beach for SEAL training for 2 hours straight. He's like, that is not long.
Yeah.
He's like, you want to talk about boredom and you want to talk about suck? Like, I was bored and it sucked for 2 hours straight with the lunge.
Crazy.
2 hours of lunges, just lunges. On top of the other 8 to 10 hours of training they did that day.
Yes. And I think what happens is when you give people examples of this, of things other people have done, they're like, they eat instantly. The thing to do is to compare. Oh, well, that's them. Oh, that's different. No, it's not. There's nothing different about any type of fitness. It's, again, perception and what have you been through.
Exactly.
And you have to be willing to go through different things in order to grow, in order to see progress. But when you have a ceiling cap and you're just only willing to do, this list of things, well, then forget it.
Yeah. And we're actually going to dig into that later with our blanket statement section.
Yes.
But so we did a really good job covering the measuring fitness and health section. Let's actually really briefly cover measuring nutrition. Just very briefly, we'll go over that. And then we'll kind of come back to what we're just talking about with addressing blanket statements, which I think will be a little bit more fun. Yeah. But I do want to address nutrition because I think it's very important. So the importance of tracking nutritional and intake habits. Now, I know this may sound boring. So if you are bored, don't really care. If you really want to skip ahead. I'm not going to give you a timestamp. But there's a lot of tools and methods there are to measuring nutrition and, food diaries, macro counting, all that fun stuff. It's not fun to track, but there's no way to know if you're actually doing it right without tracking. And there's no way we can help you unless you actually track. Because how many people do we talk to who are like, oh, I eat healthy? And we're like, well, how do you know? And then they're like,
if that was true, you wouldn't be unhappy with where you're at right now.
If that were true, you wouldn't need to tell me that.
Exactly. And if it were true,
I would be able to just see it.
Yes, exactly. It would be obvious. Nutrition and tracking, like Matt said, it's very important, very hard to do because it's very tedious and time consuming. And hard because you realize I only eat carbs or I only eat fat. Like, what else am I supposed to eat? And you have to change. This isn't just about changing your food. This is about changing your entire understanding and perception of what is needed in order to fuel your body in the direction that you want to go. Oh, well, you want to get stronger. Okay, well, then you have to change entirely how you eat and how much you eat and when you eat. There's all these different components to it, and you can get very specific. And if you think if it's not working, well, then you need to try harder.
Yeah.
And you need to get more specific. And then if that's not working, then you need to seek professional help. I can't believe people go for so long without asking for guidance and help from a professional or just somebody who maybe they look up to. Like, hey, Matt, you look really good. You look fit. What do you do? And and listen to what they do and then try to copy it.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work for you after 2 to 4 weeks, okay, make an adjustment. But people are, number one, they don't do it often enough. Like they do it for 1 day, maybe 2 days. And then there's the excuse of, oh, I didn't have time or whatever.
Yeah, because it's tedious.
And guys, you're going to see zero progress if you only last 2 days.
Exactly.
Like it has to be consistent for 2 to 4 weeks. I would even argue longer than that. But to at least give us a good reference point, it has to be the same. It is science. If you ever, everybody took high school. You all took science, you all took chemistry or whatever. And I know you were doing experiments and you had a hypothesis, you had to follow it, you had to do all the steps. And if you didn't do it in a row, your experiments wouldn't work out and you get an F. Okay, it's the same thing with eating. If you don't do it consistently enough, it's not going to work at all.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the most overlooked things that people tend to see is that they think that there's some special snowflake and they're always the exception. So one of my rules of almost anything, regardless of if it's like, I want to be a better dad, I want to be a better business owner, I want to be a better coach, I want to be a better husband, I want to be just a better person in general. If I'm working on anything, my rule is always replicate before you reiterate. Mm-hmm. Because success leaves clues. Yes. And so it's like you always copy what someone or do the steps that someone else has already taken to be successful at that thing. Mm-hmm. And it's unreasonable to think that you will not at least make some sort of progress towards getting better. And if you kind of go off the path thinking that you're some special snowflake and it doesn't apply to you, and then you get upset at the lack of results, well, it's because you did not follow in the same footsteps as the successful person did before you. Like, is it going to be perfect? Probably not. No, it never is, because there are circumstances, believe me, but the easiest way or the safest way the most efficient way to cross a frozen lake is to follow the footsteps. Yep. So follow the footsteps and copy what someone else who's successful has done, and you'll at least get somewhere. Oh, for sure. I mean, I can't think of one time that I didn't follow procedure, in anything, fitness, health, or nutrition related, that didn't work. It all worked. It always worked. And that's kind of my thought process when I get frustrated with something and I'm not seeing progress fast enough. I really try to look back and be like, okay, it has to work, because what am I doing wrong and what step am I messing up? Because it's never me. It's how I did the process. I missed something. There is no special stuff, just like Matt said. Either you did it right and it worked, or you did it wrong and that's why you didn't get the results. Exactly. And then there's a reoccurring theme here of, the more ways you measure, the more ways you can win. Because in a nutrition context, right? Like a lot of times, I feel like I'm eating healthy until I'm actually tracking it, and I'm like, oh my God, well, no wonder why I'm not happy with my body composition, or no wonder why my energy levels are low. Like I'm way under on calories. Mm-hmm. I'm too high on fat. I'm not hitting my protein. I'm not hitting my carbs. So it's like, oh man, I actually need to eat a lot more. Yep. And then for some people, it's like you need to eat a lot less, or like your macros are way out of balance. It's like, oh, I have brain fog. It's like, okay, well, let's track your food. Let's see what you're eating, because let's start there with the macro level of things, or zoom out and see what the big things are affecting it. And then when we measure that, then we can start making changes from there. But we can't change anything until we have any data to back it up. Yep. Because again, start making decisions based on data and evidence. Yep. Because it's really easy, and we're going to get right into this now, of making blanket statements of just being like, well, everyone does this. Well, who is everyone? Yes. Okay. Or like, I'm big boned, or I have a slow metabolism. Okay. Well, what tests have you had what kind of data can you show me on your metabolism? Mm-hmm. So like, yeah. People tell me this all the time. Like, oh, like Matt said, I eat healthy. Oh, I work out a lot. Oh, I lift a lot. What is a lot? And be a little bit more specific. And you know what? Every time we ask somebody this, they have nothing. Nobody has ever actually told me any data or facts. When they think about it, they're like, oh yeah, well, I don't know. It's just something I read, or it's just something I saw. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so you have zero. You don't even know another person that actually is experiencing the same thing as you. It reminds me of that scene from Inside Out when they spill all the things, opinions and facts, and then they get them all mixed up. And then they're like, oh, it's okay. All these get mixed up all the time. Yeah. Opinions and facts. Exactly. And people only have opinions. Very rarely does somebody actually come in with a fact.
Like, does anybody, very rarely do I have somebody who's like, Caitlin, I did this blood work. Here's my blood work. Like I had like one person recently who has actually showed me their blood work panel and being like, I tested for this. And I'm like, wow, like this is really good to go off of. We can make a lot of decisions based off of this information. Thank you for doing that. Other people are just like I drink enough water, or it's
what is enough? And how much water are you drinking?
And also, who did you get this information from? If you're just reading this willy-nilly on Instagram or whatever, like try to look for people that are credible, and by credible, I don't just mean like they have, a symbol before their name or after their name. It's also people who you want to emulate. Just like Matt said before, like I follow a bunch of very fit women and men, I guess, on Instagram who I'm like, oh, cool. Like,
what men are you following?
Just guys who have like good form and just I want to look like them, or I want to lift like them. So I'm going to listen to what they do too, because they obviously I want to follow people who walk the walk and talk the talk, right? Not just somebody who talks and doesn't play the part as well. So I think before you start listening to somebody, make sure they have something that you want, and then figure out, how they got there.
Yeah. Also, like when it comes to measuring and tracking, make sure you verify what information you're getting it from, because I have people come to me all the time and they're like, oh, Matt, I did my own research. And I'm like, okay, were you on like PubMed, or like where did you get the Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Or like where did you get this information? And they're like, oh, Instagram. I'm like, okay, well, stop right there.
Yeah.
Not everything on Instagram is credible. Just because it's on Instagram doesn't mean it's true. I've seen some horrendous things on it. There's a lot of good stuff, but believe me, there's a lot of bad stuff too.
You got to filter through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, the more ways you can measure progress in terms of like where you're actually getting your information as well is extremely important.
Yep. And just avoid blanket statements. Start tracking specifically. But also, I guess we should say, like, don't overwhelm yourself. There's so many things to track. You got to kind of, filter through what is top priority. And I think working with a coach will help you decipher what is top priority. Like if I have somebody come in and do a goal review with me and they say, well, I want to lose 10 pounds, but I also want to gain muscle. I want to get a pull-up, and then I also want to sleep 8 hours and drink. I'm like, okay, wait, what is the top priority here? And I can also help you understand, like, well, if you fix this one, it will automatically fix this one. So we don't even have to do that, actually.
Yeah.
And I think, again, working with a professional will help you, prioritize, make a list, and execute, and you're more likely to be successful.
Yeah. That reminds me of a funny meme that one of our members sent me. It was a scene from Family Guy of when Peter Griffin joins a CrossFit gym, and then he goes up to the coach, and then he's like, oh, what's your favorite food? And then Peter goes, pizza. And he's like, oh, that's bad. And then he goes, okay, what's bad about it? He's like, oh, it's so bad. And he's like, okay, so what specifically? Like what in pizza is bad? He's like, oh man, like it's just bad. it just kept on going like that for a while, Family Guy.
Yes.
And I laugh so hard because I'm like, that's so true, because like both from bad coaches and from people who don't really know what they're talking about getting bad advice. So they'll just say like carbs are bad. Well, they'll say lifting heavy weights will make you bulky. And so when you don't have context on this, and like how, like when you ask them, like, how are you measuring how weights will make you bulky, or how are deadlifts specifically bad for your back?
Yeah.
What data do you have to back this up? What data do you have to say that, hey, carbs are bad? But now we know that it's just excess calories from carbs that are bad, which is every macronutrient.
Yeah, it's just if you overeat on something, nuts could be bad.
So
right,
so all you have to do is measure calories.
Yes,
I mean, so you have to pick and choose what your measurements are and go with the bigger viewpoint.
Yes,
on that. So that's addressing blanket statements. Anything else you want to say about that?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. We're going to move into our final segment here called the gap and the gain, and I think this is really important for us to talk about because when you are measuring things, it's really easy to compare yourself to other people or compare yourself to who you were when you peaked when you were 26 years old. It's really easy to compare yourself to who you were pre-kids or, of where you were at when you were at peak athletic performance. And it's really easy to get caught in that. I do this all the time.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that's really important to talk about.
Yeah. I'd say between the two of us, and I told Matt this earlier, I think I'm better at not comparing myself than he is. He gets a little bit in his head of comparing what he used to be, because Matt used to be very CrossFit competitive and like compete. And so it is easy to compare yourself to what you used to be. But when we talk about the gap and the gain, it's more important to look towards the future versus always looking towards the past. And the past is there for us to learn from, but it's not there to compare ourselves to. What we want to be doing is always looking towards the future of where do we want to go? Where do I want to be in 5, 10, and 20 years from now? And I think a lot of fitness influencers actually kind of talk about this a lot too, of like, you know, you want to be the grandma that can still run around with the kids. Like those are measurements, right? Seeing where you're going to be at when you're older. That would be a good thing to measure and start measuring. And that will keep you moving forward and looking for constant progress versus always comparing what you used to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, that is such a negative cycle to get caught in. And I avoid that a lot because I used to be competitive myself, just in a different sport. And although I don't do that sport anymore, I honestly think I'm only getting fitter. And I know it's not going to be like that forever. After each pregnancy, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna get back to what I used to be. And, you know, luckily, I think just because I've been getting better with my workouts and programming and understanding the body more, I think that's allowing me to get better. But I do understand that this will end at some point. I'm sure when I hit 40 or something, like it might go downhill and I might not be as fit as I used to be, but that's not my end game. My end game is to be fit all the way into my 60s, 70s. And if I can get into 80s, that would be great too. And by fit, I mean able to walk around independently and do everything that I want to do independently and still have a good mind as well.
No, absolutely. And I like what you said about that, because I think another way, you know, we're talking about measurement, right, is like measuring also on a longer time horizon, not just measuring specifically stats, health markers, or sleep or nutrition. It's like, you know, how long will I be able to do this? And that's probably the most important measurement we can have. And I was having this conversation with someone else the other day in a goal review. I was like, hey, because they were kind of disappointed in their fitness. And I was like, hey, well, what would happen though if you were 80 years old and you were as fit as you were today? And they'd be like, I'd be stoked. I'm like, well, then technically, like if you're not making like super great progress right now, but you are getting older, like this person was in their 50s. So I'm like, if you're getting older and you're maintaining the exact level of fitness, like if you can squat the exact same amount of weight, if you can run the exact same speed, and you are getting older into your 50s, you're technically getting fitter.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, also not just age, but I mean, responsibilities. I mean, we kept adding a kid every 2 years. We added a kid. And, you know, although Matt, you might not think you are as fit as you used to be, you added a lot more responsibilities to your life, and to still be able to maintain, you know, your physique and also your ability, like that's impressive in itself. And oftentimes this gets overlooked. Like everybody just forgets, you know, well, your life was completely different 10 years ago.
Exactly. Like, and thank you for bringing that up, because I get in my head all the time, because I was at one point very competitive. And just so you guys know, like I competed at regionals 3 times. I wanted to go to the CrossFit Games. I finished 10th at one of the largest competitions individually outside of the CrossFit Games. So I was considered kind of an up and comer. I started like making a name for myself in Southern California. I was invited to different training things. I had a high-level coach who worked with me, who also coached high-level games athletes. So I was like, you know, an up-and-comer. And I never made it because I do now. I still have mindset issues. I definitely do blame my own mindset for the lack of where I could have gone.
Execution.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't even execution. It was like I got in my own head very easily. Not in terms of like I competed well, but I never thought that, you know, I didn't have as much confidence as I did in my fitness back then. And so I always do compare myself to where I was. Like I could squat like 400 pounds for like 5 reps. I could do 17 muscle ups unbroken and run a 5-minute mile. I could do Fran in 220 and not even break a sweat. Like I was really fit.
Yeah, and now it's different, but at the same time, you know, you have other priorities, you have other responsibilities, and to still be able to do what you do, like that's a great measurement of health, fitness, and longevity.
Yeah. And my measurement also have just changed. Like I still want to be fit, but I don't care as much about my actual stats. I care more about my health markers. I care more about my body composition, my resting heart rate. I care more about how well I'm sleeping. I care more about stress and how I'm measuring how much time I get to spend with my family outside of the gym. So those are my new measurements for success.
And again, I think a lot of people don't reflect on this too. Like if you've been fitnessing, you know, consistently or even inconsistently, I would say for 5 years, or I would say 3 to 5 years, you really got to start looking at other areas to measure and hope that you can start focusing on that. And that's going to help you improve in the stuff that you've been kind of stuck in for a really long time. And also just, it makes fitness and life a little bit more fun and a little bit less stressful. You don't get so down on yourself. But yeah, like I think people need to start venturing out a little bit more on things they measure and how long they measure for, and it'll really help, I think, their overall fitness.
Yeah,
and health.
Yeah, absolutely. And psychologically, all human beings, we're naturally prone to always seeing the negative. Oh, I don't have this. I don't have that. And case in point, I watched. I'm making myself sound weird and nerdy here, but I watched a Mr. Beast video, and there was this contest where these two contestants had to stay in this cube room with no amenities whatsoever, just like a bed, and that was it. The lights didn't even turn off for 100 days, and they would they would win $250K each if they stay at.
They didn't make it.
No, they made it.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
They made it. But here's the thing, though, is that they got all these different temptations throughout the thing. They're like, oh, here, if you pay me 10 grand out of your 250, you can get all these movies and a TV. And then almost every time they would deny it. But then there was this one part of where they actually brought it all in. They're like, hey, everything that they denied, because they rejected everything. Personal chef, TV, movies, a nice bed.
Just for $250,000.
Well, I mean, so they would have 250K.
Oh, okay.
And then they could spend that money to get things to make the 100 days easier.
Okay.
So it was actually really interesting. It's a great social experiment. But then Mr. Beast came in and was like, hey, if you want, bid, or just give me like an estimate of what all this stuff would cost. And then if you're under it, I think he said if you're over it, no, sorry. I think he said who cares? But if you're under it, then you get everything.
Okay.
And they end up bidding on it, and then they ended up getting all of it. So they got everything they needed for they had 30 days left.
Yeah.
They got everything they needed. But then guess what?
What?
They got bored again.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything, they had everything, but then they couldn't make decisions. They're like, so it just goes to show that you can
have it all.
You can have it all and still find something negative to be about. So I just thought that was really interesting. And I thought I'd bring that up because it's funny because they went from literally having nothing other than food and a shower and a bed.
See, simplicity is where it's at. That is what you should learn from that experiment. Honestly, is that overstimulation, right? They couldn't make decisions.
Well, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
They were just as unhappy as they were with all the stuff as they were without it. Because they thought they wanted all this stuff. And I think a lot of times when we're measuring, it's like, oh, I want all this stuff. I did the same thing when I was competing. It's like, oh, I really want a 255 pound snatch. Well, guess what? Once I hit 265, guess what I wanted?
300.
I wanted 275.
Oh.
Because then that was then I'm snatching blue, green.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been so cool, though.
I never hit 275, but I snatched 265. And so it's funny that, even if you get exactly what you want, you're going to be happy for 5 minutes, and then you're just going to and then you're going to have that gap and be like, I want the next thing.
Yep. And that's only natural too. That's kind of the beauty of being a human, is that you're always pushing the envelope, right? The measuring stick is always slightly going a little bit further, but that's what's just going to make you better.
Yeah.
If it's not going forward, well, then it's going backwards.
100%. And I'll leave you with one little story. Oh, unless you have anything else to say.
Nope.
Okay. One of the ways that my coach helped me stay motivated and helped me keep me out of the gap or thinking about the negative was that he would measure everything. So I'll just simplify the example, was that I would do every version of snatch, everything from a 10 rep max touch and go to a 5 rep max touch and go to a 1 rep max to a 5 rep max hang snatch to 5 rep max hang power snatch, all these different measurements. So every time that I would always hit some sort of a PR.
Yeah.
And then that would always make me motivated. Be like, because especially when you get to a certain level, you can only progress so much. Like a 1% gain on a snatch at some point is very hard to get, especially once you start getting that higher levels. It's really hard to hit a PR on anything.
Yeah.
So the more ways we measured, the more ways we won, the more ways we were able to stay motivated and look forward to the next goal.
Yes, I mean, that's a great point to have. And I think it ties everything in that we talked about as far as having variety of things to measure and not getting so hung up on the exact same measurements for sometimes years, and never venturing out and seeing, the bigger picture of what am I getting better at overall?
Yes,
and
100%.
And I think if anybody takes anything from this, I hope you go back and reflect a little bit on your own personal fitness, health, and nutrition, and just kind of zoom out a little bit and reprioritize what you want to work on and how you're going to measure that. And if you need help doing that, I hope you reach out, and you can always reach out to one of us. Coaches at Red Wolf, and we will help you, generate that list and get you moving forward again.
100%. Well said. Well, thank you so much for listening. If this was helpful, please leave us a 5-star review so we know to make more content just like this. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Red Wolf CrossFit, and don't forget to DM your content suggestions there. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, good luck, have fun.
Nailed it.